So what I'm going to be doing in this episode, we've already done drums, essentially kind of walk you through my process of approaching kind of naturalizing my signal and then sculpting my signal to what I want it to sound like, and my approach from just essentially a sound engineer, like a front of house engineer standpoint or whatnot, when mixing for a room. So essentially, I kind of, gave you guys the gist of just sculpting the tones of the tom, and, why I got my drums, or why I did what I did to my drums. I take an unorthodox approach to mixing. I try not to do what everybody else does. I mean, I do study what other people do, but I don't try to apply what other people do and their methods. I kind of just do what works for me, because kind of every artist and every song kind of just brings its own vibe to it, and I just try to create along the lines of what I hear. So you may see me break a couple rules, and I really don't care about breaking the rules, as long as by the end of the final print it sounds amazing. So cool. I'm always shooting for amazing. Yeah, you'll see me drinking every now and then, just because I'm thirsty. I'm gonna try to knock all this out as quick as possible. First, in this episode, I'm going to cover bringing in effects, bringing in percussion and bass. And then the next episode is going to be bringing in effects to kind of merge all that together, and why I take those approach. And then the video after that will be mixing guitars. So I kind of shortened out the session, cleaned out the session, just to kind of make things a little bit more eye friendly. But everything is still there. So the rest of the session, keys, background vocals, all that stuff, lead vocals, crowd, they're still there. I just hid them. Let me hide the guitars too as well. So once we get to the guitars, then I'll bring them back. But here we go. Let's get to work. I probably should have muted the guitars before I hit them. Boom. All right, cool. All right, so let me just jump into the drums. Okay, cool. So we already have a good reference point, like where we want to start with the drums. So right now at this point, I'm gonna focus on bringing in my bass guitar, and it's just super simple. One thing I think I should point out, usually when mixing, I mix like I'm mixing at a console. And at a console, first stage of mixing for me is gain staging. So I have to gain stage my signals in reference to one another, to make sure that when it's time to pull everything in, there's already a fair balance across the board between the signals, or between the instruments. So like for example, this kick out mic, I had to boost 7 dB. So reach for the gain knob or the trim knob at the top of the console and give myself 7 dBs, because I needed that to get to balance that signal out, but still stay at around unity, which is -7 for me. If you remember previous episode, I kind of set my unity at -7, just for the sake of having more headroom, having more space, volume space at the top when everything comes in together. So that's an example. So I had to boost that 7 dBs. I had to boost the snare 3 dBs. So I'm reaching for the top trim to get that where I need it to be. And I do this via the gain section for each channel right here, where you kind of, do whatever you need to. And what happens is these gain adjustments happen pre-processing. So, but before I hit your EQ, before I hit your compressors and all that stuff, you take care of the gain. So, and all that does affect how the plugin responds or how these units respond. So, I do that. That's why I take care of that. So I do the same thing for the bass, right? So for the bass, I found that the sweet spot for me was about negative 4 dBs. So let me bring him in, Dave. And it kind of just sits like right under the kit, right? Essentially what I want to do is first capture the dynamics of the bass guitar. So I need to make sure that at the strong moments of the bass guitar that it doesn't get out of hand and overpower the kick drum. Secondly, I need to boost the level of the bass. So I can fill in that space so the bass drum and the kick kind of just gel together at the end of the mix, so when we're done mixing. So what I have here right now is first off, Pultec EQ to kind of just sculpt some of that low end and back that low end, boost that low end. So I did a boost of 3 plus 3 at 100 hertz. So as you can see right there, you can hear the difference too. Once I shut it off, you hear the difference. And essentially what it does is just comes and sits right next to the kick drum, like, hey, buddy, I'm right here. I'm right here with you. Cool. All right. And then then the next thing that I do is a compressor. So an LA2A compressor. Now, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to switch compressors so I can kind of show you what happens once I get the compressor in there. So I'll do a silver face, which I actually prefer the silver face above the other one when it comes to bass. Actually, is that the one I want? And they all have their own tonal response and everything like that. So where we at? Yeah, this is the one I wanted. So the original, right? Cool bean. All right, and so generally what I'm looking for is about 3 dBs of reduction. Let's just say consistently about 3 dBs of reduction. Okay, that's a little too much. So around the peak moments of the song, which is about right here. All right, so it's maybe just a little too much, so I can pull back on the peak reduction, right? And then the next thing I need is for, once again, the reduction that I made. Even though I'm reducing and pulling back on the signal, that I can boost it up a little so I can come back and sit next to the kick drum. So right there, yeah. I didn't even have to do that much, to be honest with you. And it's really just sitting right there where I needed to sit. Alright, so I got kick and drums right where essentially a good starting point, right where I needed to be. And if there are any changes that I make, I'll make them later. So now finally, I want to go into percussion, to my percussion section, right? And show you how my percussion contributes to my drums. So it's not a separate section. Essentially, it's contributing just to my rhythm section. It's contributing to my drums. So now, at this point, I'm not thinking as an engineer. I'm thinking more so as an instrumentalist or a musician. Okay, cool. So let's bring it in, and so I can show you guys what we're looking at. So, all right. So first things first. I want you guys to understand how I produce. So how I produce is everything's about immersion for me. I need I need to be immersed in the image. I need to be immersed in the mix. I need to be stuck in there. So, for example, I'll give you an example. This shaker, right? Just check out the shaker. You hear the shaker. Cool. But the shaker is like just like it's right here. It's like right in front of you. It's you're not in it. It's just there. You're not in it. You're in front of it, right? Or it's in front of you. I just don't like that feeling when it comes to music. I like to be immersed in what I'm feeling. And why is because we feed off of that, especially as musicians. When performing, we feed off of that immersion, like you become part of it. So essentially, when creating my tracks or loops or click tracks or whatever, I am very big on the stereo image of it. So what I do normally is I double it, right? I'll double I'll try to double anything as much as I can. So once we get to guitars, you'll realize I'll double, and I'll double the performance. So this shaker, right, versus this shaker, they're two totally different shakers. So they're two shaker sessions. So they're actual takes, two separate takes. Okay, yeah. So you get it, right? They're two separate takes, and because of the uniqueness of each take, it's automatically gonna give you this stereo image once panned left and right. Why? Because of its anomalies, its space, its performance. Everything that makes it different will cause it to serve as essentially a three-dimensional image. So, for example, let me just add this second shaker. Let me just pan this one shaker and see what it does to the image. You see it already just like gave you this sense of, hey, I'm walking into something, right? Rather than it being in front of me, I'm like kind of walking into it. And so by the time I hard pan that second shaker, it's like, yeah. So now I'm sitting in the middle of that, right? So the second thing for me at this point, the other thing I want to make sure that I show you guys, which is a very important part, very important thing. I did it pre-recording the video so you guys can have a better understanding. But gain staging. So originally these were at 0, and I had to notch them down -15 dBs to fall within my range, to fall within my gain stage, fall within my scope where I needed to be level wise. So that's kind of where it's at for me right now at this point. So here we go. I'm being immersed by my signal. And then let me bring in things that contribute to the rhythm, which is, that's snap. Now, levels are already set. I'm going to show you the level in a second, but I want to make sure I address one thing. I never, like mono signals, I keep them out of the middle of my session. So panned at 0 or no pan at all, it just doesn't work for me. Usually that space should only be occupied by 3 things. Those 3 things are kick drum. Well, 4 things. Kick drum, snare, bass, lead vocals. 4 things. Those 4 things, those things are the only things that really should occupy the center space for me. And when I say space, that means in terms of panning. You got left, you got right, and then you got center, and all the space in between. So all the things that occupy the center spectrum for me are those 4 things. Cool. So I got that. And then look at how many dBs I had reduced that signal. Once again, just to fall around my unity level, which is -7. -7 dBs, which is cool. The next thing I kind of wanted to point out is how I write my stories. For example, I have a painting on my wall that we always, like when we're in this studio, whether it be producing, creating, whatever, there's a painting right there. And it's like a lake. And it's like like a walkway. It's in front of my, whatchamacallit. It's got a walkway, but it's a lake with this, just serene. It's just like this beauty, right? So I have that on the wall, and we look at it and we're like, what is that story? What story do we get out of that? The beauty of that is telling a story, right? So at the beginning of the track, I use percussion to kind of help tell the beginning of the story. So elements of dynamic, for example, swells, shakers, impacts, punches, those kind of different things. Those add to the writing of that story. So I bring this in, and this is, this is an actual. These are samples that I have. Samples. I have a massive sample library, so it allows me just to kind of just work freely. And what does this sound like? What's the beginning of my story sound like? What's this sound like? Okay. Wind chimes with a swell. And it kind of just takes you into where I need to take you. And it's going to continue doing it. And then you hear again the bell tree just adding to that. Yep. I got all that going on in there. Yeah. So it's that story essentially. That I use percussion, especially percussion, to help guide, especially the intro. That impression, like, at the beginning of the song. Oh man, what's about to happen? So we just want to know, what's about to happen. Okay, cool. So I bring that in there, and that's a negative 4 dBs to that to this particular file before it hits my channel strip and everything like that. Cool. The other elements I kind of want to point out, big elements, are orchestral elements. So this song for me has a point where it's just the intensity's just gotta be big for me. So it's a drive, kind of like the drive of the song, right? So cool. I got something called big drums. Now this is a sample too. Well, it's not a sample. It's samples that I essentially sequence or program to match what's happening on the drums. So once I bring the drums in, yeah. So I'll play that for you guys again. Yep. Yeah, I hear that. So it kind of puts my vibe at that moment, what story I want you guys to experience, what I want you guys to feel at that moment. Cool? And then the other thing I have another big drum that adds to the intensity. Now, one thing I want you to notice about these samples is they are stereo samples. Stereo samples. They are recorded on a sound stage, I'm not sure what the miking pattern are, but it's always 2 channels. It's always a stereo mic pair that's going on that'll record the sound stage, and that adds to dimension, that adds to the immersion experience that's kind of already done for me. So as you can see on that channel, I have nothing on that strip. It's just raw. And same thing for these. And you get that you're sitting in it. You know what I'm saying? You're sitting in it. It's not just like in front of you. It's surrounding you. And once I bring the drums in, you are now being surrounded by the mix. I just hate that feeling. I hate the feeling like I can't be part of what's happening. Like I gotta sit on the outside and experience it. I gotta sit in front of it and experience it. But I can't be inside of it. I can't experience it for myself. So that's big. That's huge for me. That's humongous for me. And I have a big drum at the beginning of the track as well. So once again, we're telling a story. Let's see what the beginning of this story says. Okay, cool. And this is just the percussion and drum section telling their part of the story. Yeah, I don't pay attention to what's happening on stage. I hope I did mention this was a live recording, so yeah. All right, cool. Bring that bass in. Bass is sitting right with the kick. Yeah, right with it. It's like they're painting that low end picture together. Like, hey, how you doing? It's like a good camaraderie, like a good intimate conversation that's happening between the kick drum and the bass guitar. Yeah, I think that's it for me. I think that's it for me in the way of this episode, really addressing more so how I produce and then oh, there was one more thing. All right, so in my percussion, big drum, I had started doing that. So I kind of wanted to, okay, once again, I'm very careful at where I place things. Hard left, pan right, or the width of a stereo image for me. So, and I just felt like this big drum needed to sit more inside of what the toms were doing. Now I remember, yeah. So kind of where the toms are sitting, I kind of put the big drum in that same area. So the pan is not wide at all. It's more so at like I would say like a 95-degree spread, I would say. Yeah, that makes more sense. Is that not even 95? That's whatever that spread is. Because I believe 100 is 90 degrees. Yeah. Yep, 100 is 90 degrees. So whatever that is, maybe 50 degrees. Probably 50 degrees, okay? So maybe about 50 degrees. Yeah, probably about 50 degrees. Yeah, probably about 50 degrees for me in there to sit with the toms. If you look at my toms, my toms are panned about that much. I don't have any of my toms panned hard left and right. Only thing on the kit that's panned hard left and right are going to be my overheads. Briefly, I think I wanted to explain, I guess, what the S1 does for me. The S1 imager, essentially what it does is it takes the left and right image and it either closes it or opens it further than the 100% or opens it further than the 90 degrees that we're looking at here. Yeah, like the 90 degrees that you see in that triangle right there, right? So I can either go past the 90 degrees or I can close my stereo image. The reason why I do that is because, okay, I have a lot of things panned hard left and right just for the sake of that immersion, right? Okay, so for example, my shakers right here are panned hard left and right. Cool, that makes sense. But if my overheads are panned hard left and right as well, they get lost. So you essentially can't really hear the shakers. You can't hear the shakers like that. So I have the images. I have the image of this closed off by 8 degrees or so. I have it closed off, so it's just inside of the hard pan left and right. And then I have the shakers right at the hard left and right because I don't have the S1 plugin on there doing anything for that image, and that's fine. But that's just so things aren't sharing the same space. I don't want my drums and my shakers to be in the same exact position. I want everything to kind of sit in its own row, in its own seat, and do its own thing, and for it to be able to be heard. Okay? So the important part is for it to be heard, for you to be able to point it out and say, yo, I can hear that the guitar is sitting right here to my left, right in this section. Got it? So cool. So that's the purpose of the S1. And the other thing I needed to do that drum is I think I needed to brighten it up just a little bit. So I did a boost at 5K. I did 4 dBs at 5K, and it just made it a little brighter for me. Yeah. So once again, to match the tone of the toms, it's not an exact replica of the tom, but to match the tone of the tom. So, and then so that's that whole percussion section. And then bring the bass in. Yep. So that's it for me. On to the next episode, guys.